Welcome to DeadManTalkings. Tonight's story is a brand new series from the wonderful author WolfsCrown. You might know their work from the series I have been tracking, a bounty hunter story, ever since 2016. I literally just completed that 1 week ago. Do take time to check that out if you haven't. And so, without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Reaper of the Accursed. Let's get straight into that. Hello, dear hunter. Unfortunate souls who know the truth of what hides within the dark, and cursed shall be those who have seen those lurking horrors. Cryptid hunters may not get along with one another, but the wise understand that death unites them all against true evil. Every year, more people come into our reality. You see them at the landmarks, where all of them hang out to drink and pass time. The gifted come back with kills and stories of glory, and the young believe that it is a life of adventure, adrenaline, glory, and excitement. They do not understand that once one becomes in contact with the unknown, there is no going back. Hate them or be fascinated by them, cryptids are beasts, and their true nature is shown as there is. Us humans are more complicated. We want a happy life after all. Hunters can't live a normal life, and sooner than later the horror corrupts them, killing cryptids, seeing what they do to their victims, the instantaneous decisions they have to make on the spot. It changes them internally and externally. I was raised to give peace to the hunters who lose their humanity. I used to be a hunter, but after my brother turned into a werewolf, I had to look at things in a different way. Maybe later I'll talk about my brother, but for now let me share stories about the people who needed to be released from their shackles. Lenny Hardbones, a 54-year-old man that lived in California. The man had retired from hunting wendigos around a year before the incident. He lived with his wife, who was 7 years younger than him. She was very supportive of his job and was never afraid. Lenny's 2 sons had come along with their families to spend Christmas Eve. They lived outside of town because he did not like the noise of the cars nor contact with any other people. A report was filed 2 days after Christmas. A bear had sneaked into the house and murdered the entire family in their sleep, except for Lenny. The forensic evidence showed photographs of the family members, and they were torn apart by a monster. Hunters around the area said that Lenny had gone mad after that, and that he was looking for the monster within the forest. Hunters who had gone looking for him would return severely harmed by gunshots. Lenny would scream and fire at them to leave him alone. If you ask me, who was more dangerous, a wendigo or a man who has dedicated his whole life to hunting them? Well, Lenny has quite made a name for himself. The story said that he beat one of those monsters by punching his face until the skull of the immobilized wendigo was crushed. When I found him, he was near one tree, heavily wounded, with the corpse of a mutilated beast beside him. I came close and saw the broken man holding his rifle, pointing at me. I shot him in the head before he had the chance to pull the trigger. Troy Crofton, 24-year-old young man, a very gifted individual. Troy had his way around, making poisons that would immobilize ghouls within the Paris catacombs. He would never sell those poisons, and his recipe is still a mystery. He worked alone, but retained a high amount of respect within the French hunter community in 2004. Everyone was surprised of how well of a job he did to dispose of the ghouls. He did his job too well. What hunters did not understand is how no corpses were ever found, even if people were missing and ghouls' nests were located. The bodies of the missing people nor DNA blood samples were ever identified. You see, Troy had a peculiar hobby. He never killed the ghouls. He would paralyze them and lock them in his basement. He had created cages and chained the beasts to prevent them from crossing a line. A government agent was tasked to follow Troy after he had declined to share information regarding his methods. The agent followed him to the catacombs only to never be seen again. The government contacted the organization I was part of and sent me to neutralize him. He was not hard to find. He always wore a coat along with a flashlight attached to his belt. Along with his messy golden hair and old-fashioned blue glasses, he was impossible to miss. It took around 2 weeks before he descended into the catacombs and came back to his home around 4 a.m. Troy was a real genius, a gentleman, and was decent to cover in his footsteps. Nobody would have imagined that he was not only capturing the ghouls, but also tourists and workers who would be visiting the catacombs. No one got lost. Troy would disguise himself as a guide and would capture whomever he pleased. Troy collected rings of different sizes. Some of them fit my finger, so I would have imagined most of his victims were female. One day at his home, he was looking down into his basement, sitting on a chair without his shirt on, but he was illuminating with his flashlight. Whatever he was seeing down there, I could not see his face, but I would guess he was having lots of fun. He did not hear me. He had his TV very loud, and the haunting screams of someone being devoured by the ghouls downstairs caused Troy to not hear my footsteps. I never take things personal, but I believe in karma, and after seeing him that night, I understood that he had some twisted pleasure in seeing ghouls devouring defenseless people. I pushed him out of his chair, making him fall down to the stairs. As I went down, I noticed a young girl scared pale in the corner of the basement. Her arms and part of her legs had serious bite marks. I signaled to her to get out, but she was immobilized by fear. In front of her was really dark, but the remains of both dead ghouls and human bones were scattered around the floor. 3 chained beasts biting into the head of a man stared at Troy as he landed close to them. Troy stood up impatiently, and I pushed him again to the ghouls, who rushed and grabbed him by his hair and got on top of him. I grabbed the girl and rushed upstairs. I didn't look at Troy while he was being devoured. I lit up one of his furnishings and threw a small gas container. His house burned down along with him, and the French government did the rest to cover up his existence. As far as the girl, they took her away and began her treatment in the US. They usually make a deal and offer therapy for her silence. I don't know so much about what they do over there. Troy's records were erased and his name no longer exists. Peter Blake, the Living Bible. 36-year-old man, an expert Banshee Terminator. They called him the Living Bible because he could recite every verse by memory according to the rumors. He was a Christian, a man with a family, and made his living as a pastor. However, his main job was to also release banshees from their misery, as his family has done for generations past. If it had not been for a vampire that thought it would be funny to ruin his life by turning him, he would still be alive. The night he was turned, he had an uncontrollable urge for blood and decided to lock himself in one of the rooms within his church. I heard about him when I first started working by myself. This wife had sent out a message to help her turn him back into a human, but the elder son wanted him to be put out of his misery. No vampire hunter accepted the contract for weeks. By the time I got there, Peter had broken out of his room and trapped one of the nuns working there. He was being contained behind a heavily locked door that led to the hall. The son helped me deal with his father by buying a bunch of bear traps and setting them up in front of the door in case he escaped. Peter was a kind man. He would never have caused any harm to his family, but vampires are driven by hunger. As I opened the locked door, nothing came out. I saw Peter on the darkest corner of the hall, grabbing the nun by his long nails, impaling the woman who was already drained to the bones. I took off the silver machete and approached slowly. When he looked up to me, I could see the guilt in his eyes as the man couldn't stop crying. He had human eyes, blood around his mouth, and he was breathing heavily. He let go of the woman and on his knees lowered his head. Peter had accepted death. The only way to cure a vampire is by beheading, unfortunately, and that was the end of his road. Members of the church spread the rumour that Peter left with one of the nuns, escaping his marriage, a dishonourable end for someone who did not deserve it. Adam Derar. This one is special. It was my first government contract. I was around 16 at the time and was well known by some of my cunning skill. Adam was not a hunter in particular, but he hunted cryptids for his sorcery. What made him dangerous was the fact that he conducted a lot of forbidden experiments in one of his farms with a disclosed location. He had caught the eye of a 3-letter organisation, which I worked for. However, he was very intelligent and his house and farm was heavily secured against thieves. 2 professional thieves were sent and they were both burned alive when they opened one of the back doors. He lived outside of town to practice his magic. Looking at his history, 3 guys of his high school died in unfamiliar circumstances. They were all in his grade level and were known as bullies except for one. One of his college professors had an extreme car accident. He reported that suddenly felt a lot of pain in his hands, but survived the car crash. We were sure that Adam was a voodoo user. Sneaking into his house would be impossible. My orders were to make his death unexplainable, so it would be discarded as an accident. His property was to remain untouched, and any slight evidence of a homicide would create problems for me. He would take the bus to college and then come back to his home. He had security cameras all around, so my options were limited. But I figured something out. We offered one of his professors a sum of money to persuade Adam into mentoring me for history class. I attended his class and sat beside him. The professor explained to him that I would take the class twice to understand the subject better, that I needed tutoring, and that he was such an outstanding student, so he was chosen to mentor me for a letter of recommendation. I know, it's a bad excuse really, but Adam believed it. He was red all the time and would stutter when I would ask him a question. On the 4th day, I told him if I could hang out with him at his house because I had the test the next day. He accepted. As I got into his house, he asked me to take care not to touch certain things in the house. I recognized a lot of stuff. Some of the symbols represented extreme curses that would damage anyone who touched them with their bare hands. We studied all day long in his living room, and I asked him if I could stay in. He objected at first, but accepted after I insisted. He offered me clothes and very large shirts since he did not have a girl's clothing in his closet, for obvious reasons, he said. He was very nice. His home was also at the perfect temperature. Outside was really hot, but inside was fresh, even if there was not a thermostat. His shower had the perfect water temperature. Adam had really made his home perfect by the art of magic. It is simple sorcery, but requires a lot of effort, materials, and energy. When he fell asleep, I investigated the house to look for his voodoo doll. I found his secret room and the dolls he had used previously. The room was small. He had a lot of photographs of people on the side of the floor, along with other used voodoo dolls. There was an altar, and on it was a new doll, with a picture of a very pretty girl. She was on our class on the first day I was there, but had stopped going, based on the fact that he had a picture. It could mean that she did something he did not like. Inside the doll was her hair and a bunch of other ritual stuff, including cat bones. Adam was asleep, so I cut part of his hair on the back of his head and replaced the girl's hair with his. The doll had a couple of needle marks on the legs, but nothing lethal. In other words, Adam was playing with her. After that day, I thanked him and stopped going to the university. Occasionally, he would message me, but I ignored him. After a while, it was reported that he had stopped going to class. Magic is very powerful, but it has to have maintenance, otherwise spells lose their effect after a while. 2 weeks later, I found him on the altar with a doll in his hand, his head completely twisted. Unexplained cause of death. The property was intact, and that was about that. No police investigations, and they assumed he somehow managed to commit suicide in such a way. Our organisation took away all the tombs he had and the voodoo evidence within his house before the FBI came to investigate their own case. And of course, we had to delete the video camera clips showing how we got there first to take away all the important stuff and clean in the perimeter before the police got there. But that was not my job, so I cannot tell you how exactly it's done. I hope you do not think ill of me. I really do not enjoy what I do, but see it as a necessary evil. Most of the hunters live in a prison they want to be released from. Others simply descend into insanity and have to be neutralized. Only one hunter has managed to survive, me. And because of him, I deserted my organization and started to work by myself. Now, I am a 23-year-old woman. I do not exist. The organization I was part of raised our existence, and thus we are ghosts among society. I still keep in touch with the hunter that survived. Maybe next time I will share the story. For now, hunter, please stay safe. Protect those who depend on you, and be sure that if you betray your purpose, you will be put at eternal peace. Wow, awesome stuff there. Wonderful. WolfsCrown. Thank you ever so much for giving me the heads up on that first. Really do appreciate that, and I'm sure the audience do as well. Guys and girls, you know the drill. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share and help build the channel and our community further. Help us smash our way through that 25,000 subscriber mark before Christmas. And as ever, guys, I hope you're well and happy and looking forward to a wonderful, restful weekend. And remember, be safe, not sorry.